name is Daniel, and I'm reading the second part of chapter 11 in The Witch of Blackbird Pond by Elizabeth George Spear. I believe there must be a morsel of blueberry cake for such a smart pupil, praised Hannah. The morsel of cake vanished in a twinkling. Hannah's magic cure for every ill, Nat had said. Blueberry cake and a kitten. Kit smiled to see it working, its charm on Prudence. But there was an invisible ingredient that made the cure unfailing. The Bible name for it was love. Why do they say she's a witch? Prudence demanded as the two walked slowly back along the path. Because they have never tried to get to know her. People are afraid of things they don't understand. You won't be afraid of her now, will you? You will go to see her when you can, even if I'm not there? The child considered. Yes, she said finally. I'm going back first chance I get. Not because the horn is there. I think Hannah is lonesome. Of course she is the cat to talk to. But don't you think sometime she must want someone to answer back? Watching Prudence scurry off towards home, Kit had a moment's misgrieving. As always, she had acted on impulse, never stopping to weigh the consequences. Now, too late, she had begun to wonder. Had it been fair to draw Prudence into her secret world? She felt completely justified in deceiving her aunt and uncle. They were narrow-minded and mistaken. But the thought of Goodwife Cruff made her shudder. Yet Prudence had looked so miserable. She needed a friend. For a few hours, those wary and innocuous eyes had been filled with shining trust and happiness. Wasn't that worth a little risk? Kit shook off her qualms and set her own face towards home. Another dull evening. Williams could talk of nothing but his house these days. Every evening he must report exactly what trees had been cut, which boards fashioned. Today he reported as the family moved inside to escape the twilight mist that rose from the river. He had overseen the carpenter who was splitting the white oak for some clapboards. I don't think I made any mistake in deciding on riven oak, he told them. Of course, 2 shillings a day is high for a carpenter, but... Sometimes Kit wanted to stop her ears. Would she have to hear the price of every nail that went into those boards, and every single nail the finest money could buy? She was tired of the house already before the first board was in place. Judith, however, took a lively interest in such details. She had a flair for line and form and a definite mind of her own, and it was plain, to Kit at least, that William planned his house. Judith with and it was clear she had a flair for line and form and a definite mind of her own, and it was plain, to Kit at least, that William planned his house. Judith was comparing it, timber for timber, with the house she dreamed for herself. Her purpose was only too apparent as she made adroit attempts to draw John Hollenbrook into the discussion. I think you should have one of those new roofs, William, she said. Gambrel, they call them, like the new house on the road to Hartford. I think that they look so distinguished, don't you, John? Mercy laughed at John's bewilderment. I don't believe John even noticed there's a roof over his head, she teased gently, unless the rain happens to leak through onto his nose. And then he'd just pick up his book and move somewhere else, added Kit. William did not smile. He was considering the matter gravely. Perhaps you're right, Judith. When I ride down Hartford way tomorrow, I'll take a look at the house. Of course, you'll never know whenever to risk a new style like that. Oh, for heaven's sake! Kit gave her yarn an impatient jerk that sent the ball bouncing across the floor. Too tardily, William bent down to catch it, and had to get down heavily on his knees to retrieve it from under the settle. Now some men, Kit reflected, could pick up a ball of yarn without looking ridiculous. She thanked him with little grace. It was Mercy, as usual, who quietly steered them into untroubled waters. What did you bring to read to us tonight, John? She inquired. Judith, the light a pine knot for him. Sorry, Judith lights a pine knot for him to see by. In this one, in this one thing, they were all untied. John loved to read out loud, and they were all equally happy to listen. For all of them, the days were filled with hard labor, with little enough to satisfy the hunger of their minds and spirits. The books that John shared with them had opened a window on a larger world. Perhaps each of them, listening, glimpsed through the window at a private world unknown to the others. Matthew Wood sat scowling, his keen mind challenging and weighing each new thought. Rachel, Kit suspected, welcomed the peace and relaxation of those moments as much as the reading itself. What William thought was impossible to discern. Kit often wished that John would read something besides the religious tracts he so admired, but even for her impatient spirit, the beauty of his voice wove a magic spell. Tonight it was poetry. These were written by a woman in Boston, he explained. Annie Bradstreet, wife of a governor of Massachusetts. Dr. Bulkery feels that they are worthy to be compared with the finest poetry of England. This is what she writes about the sun. Art thou so full of glory that no eye hath strength thy shining rays once to behold? And is thy splendid throne erect so high as to approach it can no earthly mould? How full of glory then must thy Creator be, who gave his bright light lustre unto thee, admired, adored for every be that majesty. Kit's needles moved more slowly, her jangling nerves relaxed, and as the clear, low voice went on, the contentment wrapped around her like the sunshine in the meadow. John is a part of the family already, she reflected. We have all come to love him, yet I feel in awe of him, a little. Uncle Matthew thinks he's weak, but I suspect that underneath they are both made of the same New England rock. For John, everything in his life, even the girl he marries, will always be second to his work. Does Judith realize that, I wonder, or does she think she can change him? Suddenly, perhaps because the poetry opened her heart, Kit raised her eyes and made a discovery. Mercy sat, as usual, slightly in the shadow beside the hearth, her needles moving so automatically that she rarely glanced at her work. Now, a brightly glowing bead of resin threw a brief light across her face. Those great listening eyes were fastened on the face of the young man bent over his book, and for one instant Mercy's whole heart was revealed. Mercy was in love with John Holbrook. Faster than thought, the shadows claimed Mercy again. Kit glanced hastily around the circle. No one else had noticed. Judith sat dreaming, a little secret smile on her cheeks. Rachel nodded drowsily, too tired to keep her mind on the reading. Matthew sat intent, under the pounce on a hint of heresy. I must have imagined it, thought Kit, yet her hands were shaking. Mercy and John Holbrook? How right, how incredibly, utterly right, and yet how impossible. I wish I had not seen it, she thought, in a burst of sadness. Yet she knew she would never forget as long as she lived. The flame that had burned in Mercy's eyes, and such purity, such complete selflessness, that everything Kit had ever known seemed to dim in its light. What must it be to care for someone like that?